Hello. It is an honor to be here. This is a unity program. And one of the things I love to see is people coming together for a common cause. And y'all just make me feel good. Besides that, I didn't know who they were talking about. I had to pinch myself and then realize that the mayor was talking about me. Hey. I'm going to tell you a short story. And in this story, it's going to tell you about the man that we are honoring today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and how he changed my life. But I got to begin when I was 7 years old. See, at 7, my mother died, and I'm the oldest of 4. And my grandparents and the older people around me said my mother wouldn't have died if she hadn't been colored, that she would have been able to get the blood she needed to live from an all-white hospital in Selma. But instead, they had to send some 90 to 100 miles away to Birmingham, Alabama, to get the blood my mother needed to live. The blood came by trailway bus, and it stopped at every little corner between that 100 miles to Selma. And when the blood arrived, they said my father was 15 minutes late. My mother had already died. Well, I was 7 years old, and I figured that since white people hated me, I was going to hate them back. And I was going to make a change when I got big, because nobody else's mommy would ever die because of the color of her skin. So I'm going to let you know, when I was 7 years old, every little fiber of my 7-year-old being hated white people in Selma, Alabama. And I didn't know what I was going to do to make the change, but I knew in my heart that one day I was going to make a change. Dr. Martin Luther King came to speak at a church in Selma. I was 13 years old, and my grandmother took me and my siblings to hear him speak. Now, there's a little story behind that. We used to watch a story on Saturdays called Sergeant Preston of the Yukon. And Sergeant Preston had this beautiful German Shepherd dog named King. And King saved everybody and everything in 25 minutes on Saturday. So we knew we were going to see King, the German Shepherd. We had decided how we was going to shake King's paw and hug King's neck. But then a man named Mr. James Baldwin got up and introduced Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Of course, we were disappointed. But when this man started to speak, he made everybody come closer to listen to him, because his voice was just like, ooh, his voice just was good, y'all. I can't explain it. At 13, I wanted to hear what this man was saying, and I kept leaning up so I could hear. Dr. King said in his speech, he was talking about how our parents, it was time for them to get the right to vote, and how he was going to do it. We were going to do it nonviolently. Whatever he was saying, I was with it. He sounded that good. But he said, you can get anybody to do anything with steady, loving confrontation. And when he said those 3 words, I heard him. And I said, wow. And then when he said it again, it was like saying, Lynda Blackmon, you can get anybody to do anything with steady, loving confrontation. It hit me. I said, there go my change. I know how to make change. And I was determined from 13 years old to make that change. That change came in the form of marching nonviolently, going to jail, marching, going to jail, marching, and going to jail. But that's how we brought that change. We were consistent. We didn't march one day and stop. We marched twice in a day, every day. I ended up in jail 9 times. Got to tell you about being a jailbird. I was a good jailbird. Enjoyed being a jailbird. I had all my jailbird friends with me. But we were in jail because we believed in something. We knew that one day what we were going to jail for would make a change. We weren't in jail for hurting nobody. We wasn't in jail for taking anything from anybody. We were in jail to make a difference. And it was nothing like being in jail. Now, we were scared in jail. I'm not going to tell you it was fun. It was scary. We had each other's backs, but those big men had billy clubs and guns and cattle prods. Cattle prods was these sticks with an electric shock on them that they used for their livestock on their farms. And they could use them anytime they wanted on us. But we would get there, and if one cried, all of us cried, because we were all scared. If one did something, all of us took a part in it because we didn't want just one to be singled out. It helped us when we would sit up there and they'd tell us to be quiet and we go, we shall overcome, to the loudest. I mean, just the loudest. And that would irritate them so much. I got to like the song. I really did. Because that song in particular, of all the freedom songs we sung, seemed to be the one that irritated white people the most. And we did overcome. One day, it was 23 of us in jail. We had been in this jail cell for 3 days, all girls. And one of my friends, Pat Green, got sick. And we called the jailer. We asked him, told him she was sick and we needed help. He brought us some brooms. And I'm going to use the word because this is what the word was back then. He told us, niggers, clean up this place. It's dirty. But across the little catwalk in the jail, there was a window. And you could see the street, Franklin Street. And it was a street where black people had their shops and stores. And black people were walking up and down. So I decided to take the mop handle and break that window so we could call for help because Pat was really sick. Broke the window, we called for help. Let them know we had been there 3 days and people were sick. The jailer came in and he said, "Which one of you niggers broke that window?" Since none of us was niggers, we didn't answer to it. We didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "I'm going to ask again, which one of you niggers broke that window? If you don't tell, I'm going to put you in a sweat box." Now we started thinking, because we didn't know what a sweat box was or what it would do. Obviously make you sweat, but when you're scared, you don't think like that. So I said, "I broke the window." And he said, "Your name, nigger?" And I said, "Lynda Blackmon." And then somebody stood up beside me and said, "I'm Lynda Blackmon." Somebody behind me, "I'm Lynda Blackmon." It was about 5 Lynda Blackmons that day. And the jailer thought we were being funny. We were trying to take care of each other. That's how we had each other's back. He took 21 of us. He left Pat and another girl in the cell. And he took 21 of us and put us in this little iron box. It was just an iron box. Had an iron door with a little shutter in it, and he throwed us in there and closed the door. It was dark, airless. I don't know how long we were in there, 5 minutes, 5 hours. All I know is when I woke up, the prisoners was taking all of us into a courtroom. And Judge Bernard Reynolds told us that we didn't smell so good and to go home and leave his courtroom. Told us to write our names on a piece of paper. So we did. We wrote Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse, Long Ranger, Tonto, and we thought we were getting over. So we, wrote these names and we went on. I, for one, got out of jail that day, took a bath, ate, and ended back up in jail that evening. Was in jail for another 3 days before they took us to a prison camp outside of Selma, 10 to 15 miles, called Camp Selma. We were there for 2 whole days and nights and a 3rd day. And for 3 days, they fed us black-eyed peas 3 times a day. Then on the 3rd day, they took us and put us on school buses. See, we were really scared because we had never been to prison before. And we didn't know if our parents or the leaders knew where we were. So they took us and put us on a bus, and we thought we were going home. Bus ride got longer and longer, and our imaginations began to stretch and stretch. And we just knew we were going somewhere in a field for the Ku Klux Klan to kill us or something. But we were going to die for our freedom. I wasn't ready right then, though. Maybe some of the others were, but I wasn't. They took us to another prison camp, however, 30 miles away, called Camp Thomaston. We were at Camp Thomaston for 6 days. And 3 times a day for 6 days, guess what they gave us to eat? Anybody? Woo, black-eyed peas. Guys, I'm 65. I do not eat anybody black-eyed peas. I haven't eaten black-eyed peas since I was 14. They're my kryptonite. They make me weak. No black-eyed peas. But then our families found out where we were, and they had them bring us home. Now, those were about the scariest times in jail. in 1965 on March 7th. It's called Bloody Sunday because a group of us decided to go from Selma to Montgomery, the capital, to let the then governor know that we still wanted the right to vote. We deserved certain rights under the Constitution, and that's what we wanted. We was asking for no more or no less. And we decided to do that march because a young man had died from being shot during a night march in Marion. His name was Jimmy Lee Jackson. And Jimmy Lee had been shot and he died 8 days later. And we wanted to let the governor know that death was not a deterrent to us. I was in the 19th row of that march on that Sunday morning. We got to the end of the bridge. When we got to the crest of the bridge, we could see all the state troopers and sheriff's deputies and posse. When we got down to the bottom of the bridge, they told us we could not march. We were an illegal assembly, could go no further. When Representative John Lewis asked if he could speak with them, he told them no, he couldn't. No words to be said. They started putting on these gas masks. We didn't know what they were. I thought it was something from the Outer Limits, a TV show, you know. Didn't know. So my group leader, James Webb, said, let's pray, because that's what we would normally do. Get down and pray, get up and go and regroup. We got down on our knees, and all of a sudden, we heard the gunshots. The gunshots was this gas. This gas caused you couldn't breathe. You couldn't see. And it was very confusing. I felt someone pulling me back by the collar, and I was resisting. And that person then decided to put both of his hands on me and jerk me back. As he did, I bit his hand. I forgot to be nonviolent one time, okay? But I did bite his hand. And I heard the word nigger twice, and he hit me twice. Then he pushed me forward, and I managed to tumble and run directly into a cloud of tear gas. And he was running behind me, hitting me. When I woke up, I was on a stretcher. They were putting me in a hearse. We didn't have ambulances then. And I wasn't dead, so I wasn't getting in that hearse. And I let them know that. People were running back across the bridge, and I jumped up and started running too. When I got on the other side of the bridge, I saw my sister, my baby sister, whom I was supposed to be taking care of, in a man's arms. She looked like a rag doll. She looked like she was dead. And I stopped. I could not move. I thought I had killed my sister. I thought she was dead because of me. I couldn't move. Somebody was running and they pushed me. And I think that's how I got out of that stance. Because even now, 50 years later, when I talk about it, it hurts me to think that I hurt my sister. But this man told me she had just fainted. And I was trying to wake her up, and she opened her eyes, and she started screaming when she looked at me, and I just grabbed her hand, and I started running. I thought if we get back to Brown Chapel Church, we'd be safe. But when we got back to the church, oh my God, there was these state troopers, and there was the Selma City Police, the posse, and the deputies. They had surrounded the church. So we ran between the buildings, and my thought was to get to First Baptist Church. I was so confused. I ran exactly 10 feet past our back door, going to First Baptist Church. When I got there, somebody said, "She's bleeding. She needs to go to the hospital." Now, by this time, y'all, we had our own black hospital, Good Samaritan. And somebody took me to the hospital. I remember telling a lady my name at the hospital. And the next thing I remember is my daddy bringing me home that night. I ended up with 7 stitches over my right eye, the back of my head shaved, and 28 stitches. The nurses and people at that hospital say a lot of us don't remember what happened because the doctors stitched us up without anesthesia. And I can't remember a single thing that happened at that hospital, but I do know I have the scars from it. I told my father that it was important for me to be able to go to Montgomery to show George Wallace what he had done to me. But I also wanted the governor to know that he had created his worst nightmare. I was going to be an educated, independent black woman, and that seemed to scare white people in the 60s. So I was going to be his nightmare and daymare too. But my daddy said I couldn't go. I had already been hurt, and he feared for me more. But 3 wonderful women asked him if I could go because they would need someone to help them, young legs to run for them. And thank you. And he trusted them, said yes. It was only 300 people allowed to walk from Selma to Montgomery. And here I was, one of the 300. I was so excited because I was going to let the governor know what happened to me. But on the second day of that March 22nd, I turned 15 years old. I walked out of that tent, and I saw these 3 guardsmen. I focused on 3 Alabama National Guardsmen who had their guns at their waists and bayonets on the end, and they just looked like they were looking at me, and they just looked like they were coming to get me and finish the job they had started 2 weeks before. Oh my God, I was scared. I ran back in that tent terrified. I asked them not to let them kill me. I wanted to go home to the safety of the projects and my daddy. But they said some awesome things. And this one guy, white guy named Jim Lederer, he had lost a leg in a war. Jim came up and he grabbed me and he said, "Before I let anybody harm another hair on your head, I will lay down and die for you. Now, I want you to know I was kind of tempted to let him show me. But I also heard the words of my grandmother. And you talking about awesome. This woman was awfully awesome. Grandmother taught us that you never let anybody own this. When you let someone own your mind, you become a slave to whatever it is. If it's a thing like drugs, alcohol, if it's a thing, girls like boyfriends, or boys like girlfriends, you let someone own this and they take a part of you out of you. And I couldn't let that fear I felt own me. Because if I had, I knew I never would be Lynda Blackmon Lowery, ever. I took that fear and I put it under my arm to let it know I embrace it and respect it. And I decided I was still determined. See, I wasn't courageous or brave. I was just determined to do something, and that's what I did. You have that determination in you, and you can change things just by steady loving confrontation and determination. Determination is a will to do. And if you want to change things, that's how you have to do it, as far as I'm concerned. I want to say this in closing. I use the word nigger a lot. And I use the word nigger because it was used on me. That word is a hateful word. It means ownership. When you hear it in our songs, the songs that you like to listen to, somebody is always talking about my nigga. I don't care how you spell it. I don't care how you say it. That word means ownership. There's not a rapper that you are paying your money to for the music. There's nobody sitting next to you. There's nobody qualified to own you. When I was a little girl, my father, and I would walk down the street holding hands going to a store. My father was this big, strong black man. He had his hat on. He had his shoulders straight. And he had his little girl swinging her hand, laughing and talking. When we would go into a store, my father's hat came off. My father's shoulders slumped. His head went down. And children younger than me could say, "What you want, nigger?" And my father used to squeeze my hand. I guess so I wouldn't say anything, and he wouldn't say anything. That word needs to come out of your vocabulary altogether. It needs to. Some parts of growing up in a segregated society is still hurtful to those who lived it. We made changes for you And some of you will never vote. You'll never encourage anybody else to vote. And that's an insult. An insult to the memory of those who died. An insult to those who bled and went to jail. I am getting a little emotional now. So I'm going to say, keep this unity thing going. Keep it going. You need each other. There's not one group of people that can just depend on themselves and nobody else. You need each other. This is a beautiful thing. I thank you all for having me here.
Pretty humbling, huh? I want to present, and it is really such an honor for me to be able to do this, to present you with a plaque. It says, "Thank you for helping the city of Peoria honor King's vision of all people coming together equally." On behalf of the city of Peoria, it's my honor to present this with you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I didn't intend to stop. Thank you.